In another serious escalation here in the Middle East tonight, Iran has launched a barrage of missiles towards Israel on the same day that Israel launched a ground invasion into southern Lebanon against Hezbollah. Well, across Israel just a few hours ago, the sound of sirens were heard. People ran for cover in bomb shelters and the sight of bright flashes and explosions were seen in the sky. Now, Israel has said that the attack will have consequences. Iran has said that if Israel retaliates, its response would be, in its words, crushing and ruinous. Well, the Israel Defense Forces said around 180 missiles were launched towards Israel this evening. Warning sirens sounded right across the country at around 5:30 UK time, and explosions were heard soon after. Now, those missiles were fired across huge swathes of Israel, including towards Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Well, our correspondent John Donnison is there now, and John, you, along with millions of others, had to seek shelter when those sirens sounded.
That's right. 4.5 hours ago, us, like millions of Israelis across the country, received a text message warning us to get to the shelters immediately. The sirens rang out. We ran for the safe room here in the BBC bureau. This is an unprecedented Iranian attack on Israel on this scale, and the consequences could be huge. Israel was warned it was coming, but this was Iran's revenge. Almost 200 ballistic missiles raining in across the country.
Oh God. Okay guys, we gotta get off the roof. These are coming down right next to us here.
As people ran for shelter, with the Iranian missiles travelling 2,000 kilometres in only around 12 minutes, Israel's defence system was at full stretch.
We are on high readiness for defence and offence. We will protect the citizens of Israel. This attack will have consequences. We have plans to act at a place and a time of our choosing.
This restaurant in Tel Aviv took a direct hit. And this was a school in central Israel. The US said it helped in shooting down some of the missiles. Its intelligence agencies had alerted Israel to an imminent attack, but America says Iran gave no advance warning.
The United States military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel against this attack. U.S. naval destroyers joined Israeli air defense units in firing interceptors to shoot down inbound missiles.
In Gaza tonight, as Iran pounded Israel, there were celebrations, as there were in the Iranian capital too. Iran had vowed vengeance after Israel assassinated Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Iranian-backed Lebanese militia Hezbollah, on Friday. And Israel killed the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, on Iranian soil back in July. Meanwhile, this evening in Jaffa, near Tel Aviv, just before the missile attack, Israelis were shot dead in what police say was a terrorist attack. For months now, the world's diplomats have tried to stop the year-long war in Gaza from engulfing the region. They've failed, and after tonight's unprecedented Iranian attacks, Israel is expected to hit back hard. John Donnison, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, in just a moment, we'll speak to our North America editor, Sarah Smith, because the US has confirmed tonight that its military did assist in shooting down some of those Iranian missiles as they headed towards Israel. But let's return first to John Donnison in Jerusalem. And John, what is the feeling there tonight?
Well, look, we knew that Iran was going to seek vengeance, as it put it, for the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon on Friday, and also for Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, back in the end of July. But, you know, Israel has not had an attack like this from Iran in its history. And the mood of defiance there you heard from Benjamin Netanyahu suggests that Israel is going to respond with force It's another incredibly dangerous moment in a conflict now which has lasted almost exactly a year and is spreading across the Middle East.
John, thank you. In Jerusalem to New York then, and Sarah Smith. Sarah, what has the US reaction been to this attack tonight?
Well, we heard from President Biden a few minutes ago, and he said that the attack had been ineffective and defeated, and that he had instructed the US military to assist in Israel's defense. And as we heard, US naval destroyers fired about a dozen interceptors at those Iranian missiles. President Biden and Vice President Harris watched all this happen from the Situation Room. And Mr. Biden also said, make no mistake, he is fully supportive of Israel's security. He said he hasn't spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu yet, but that he intends to, and they will discuss the consequences for Iran. And other officials here say it's just too early to start discussing what those consequences might be. But you can be sure that America is no longer going to be urging Israel to exercise any restraint in its response. They see this as an entirely different situation, what they're calling a brazen and unacceptable escalation of hostilities in the region from Iran in support of terror groups that it nurtures and supports in the region. So the emphasis here today, quite different actually from how it was yesterday, is very much on what America's calling its ironclad support for Israel's right to defend itself, although they won't say whether or not the US might actually be involved in any of that response and the consequences when that indeed comes.
Sarah, thank you. Well, fears are growing about the escalating crisis here in the Middle East. In the early hours of this morning, Israel's military said that its troops had crossed the border into southern Lebanon, and they told people living in more than 25 villages there to evacuate immediately. Well, today it was also revealed that Israeli special forces had operated inside Lebanon dozens of times over the last few months, destroying tunnels and dismantling weapons. Well, we're going to take you to both sides of the border tonight. In just a moment, we'll get the latest from our senior international correspondent, Orla Guerin, who is in the southern Lebanon city of Tyre. But first, our Middle East correspondent, Lucy Williamson, is on the border in northern Israel. Lucy.
Well, Anna, tonight, people here in northern Israel were still absorbing the news that Israel had launched that ground incursion into Lebanon across the border here. And today, we were told that Israeli special forces had spent more than 200 nights on the Lebanese side of the border, preparing the ground, finding and destroying Hezbollah targets there. The Iranian missile attack tonight, though, is a real reminder of how widespread, how unpredictable the risks of Israel's wars can be. In northern Israel, it was clear this attack was different. People well used to Hezbollah's rocket attacks, tonight glued to the sky, to their phones. Israel's air defenses tackling Iranian missiles, wave after wave. On the ground along this northern border, a new generation is fighting an old and stubborn war. A limited, targeted ground incursion into Lebanon, the army says, to destroy Hezbollah tunnels and allow Israel's northern residents to return home. 4 more reserve divisions were called up today. You can see the evidence of Israel's ground incursion here, a few miles from the border. Yesterday, there were dozens of tanks lined up in these fields. Now, almost the entire fighting force has gone, and several more armoured vehicles are preparing to move. A military official briefed journalists today that special forces had been operating just inside Lebanon for the past 11 months, destroying tunnels. They showed us the weapons they'd found. With Hezbollah weakened, I asked a spokesman about the appetite to push the group further north.
We are acting with a plan to carry out operations in a limited, targeted way, close by to the Israeli border between Israel and Lebanon, making sure we remove these immediate threats.
I asked if that plan could change.
We have many plans on the table. At the moment, we are focusing on removing the immediate threats from close by to the Israeli border.
In border towns like Kiryat Shmona, emptied a year ago by fears of a Hamas-style attack, there's strong support for Israel's ground invasion.
I am certain that this ground maneuver will bring the residents back safely, and I think it is very, very needed, and that's the answer. That's exactly what we wanted, maybe a bit too late, but better late than never.
A day into Israel's invasion, its forces have so far met little resistance on the ground. But Hezbollah remains a powerful enemy, with an even more powerful backer. The risks of this incursion have not yet fully emerged, but in the years since the Hamas attacks, Israel's risk appetite has grown. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, on the Israel-Lebanon border.
Well, Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati has said today that the country is facing perhaps the most dangerous moment in its history. And around 1 million people here in Lebanon, around 20% of the population, have now been displaced from their homes. Well, our senior international correspondent, Orla Guerin, is in the city of Tyre in southern Lebanon, very close to the area where Israeli troops cross the border. Orla.
Anna, tonight in the past half an hour or so, we've been able to see incoming Israeli strikes a few miles from here, visible from our live position. And of course, Israeli troops are on the ground. Now, they invaded by crossing the border, which is just about 12 miles from here. Israel is talking about a limited ground invasion, but that's no consolation to many Lebanese. They remember the devastation caused here in 2006, the last time Israel and Hezbollah went to war. And there are many in Lebanon, particularly here in the south, who fear that their country could become another Gaza.
The empty road to Tyre. Few were heading to southern Lebanon today. Israel is ordering residents of 27 villages in the area to leave. Inside the city, in the old Christian quarter, some of the wreckage left by a recent Israeli strike. And danger here still.
Well, within the last few moments, we've heard the sound of 2 explosions, and it sounds like there are still planes in the air. This site is where another airstrike happened over the weekend, bringing down several buildings here. We've been told that 9 people were killed here alone. Hezbollah brought us to this site to show us this damage.
We met Sausan El-Halawa without Hezbollah. She took us to her family home, which is no more. My daughter-in-law died here, she says. Her sons were injured. My husband was there and I was there. The room fell on top of us. There's nothing left. Sausan lists the names of her neighbours who died. We're just ordinary people here, she says. And then... This time, a sonic boom. An Israeli warplane breaking the sound barrier. Time to go. Many already have. Getting away before it gets any worse.
Well, you can see here there's been a massive strike. Cars have been flipped over on their sides. Trees have been ripped out of the ground. And just across on the other side of the road, there is a massive crater. Israel has been hitting this area hard, and now it has troops on the ground here in southern Lebanon.
The last time that happened, in 2006, it was devastating for Tyre. This ancient city is usually a popular holiday resort. Now it's already a victim of war. But a wider war is being played out here tonight. Iranian missiles streaking towards Israel in the skies over Tyre. Across the region now, fires burning everywhere. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Southern Lebanon.
Well, the timing of that Iranian missile attack on Lebanon tonight is particularly notable, coming as it did hours after the news that Israel had launched that ground invasion into southern Lebanon. Iran also said that that was in response to the killing here in Beirut of the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, on Friday, and the killing again by Israel in Tehran of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, just a few weeks ago. Well, let's return to our correspondent John Donison in Jerusalem. John, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has spoken tonight. He's called this a mistake. There's already talk about how and when Israel might respond.
Yes, and if you think back to April when Iran launched 300 drones and rockets towards Israel in a much more telegraphed attack actually that caused minimal damage really here in Israel, Israel responded by bombing Iran. Now, this attack tonight was much more serious. I think Israelis are going to wake up tomorrow and there's probably considerably more damage than we've seen so far tonight. There's a possibility that some military bases were hit hard. In my report earlier, you saw a school took a direct hit, also restaurants, large craters in the road. So this is, as I said, really unprecedented, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said Iran will pay. We don't know when Israel's response is going to come, but you're almost certain it will come.